collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, Cyprus joins the global campaign demanding respect for fundamental human rights, equality and diversity that marks Donald Trump's inauguration as the 45th President of the United States.
We are for defending, for protecting fundamental human rights, for diversity, for equality, for social justice, and therefore we call on everybody who respects these aims to join us this evening.
We hear about new discoveries in Kouklia, one of Paphos' ancient city kingdoms.
We think that the mound, based on the ceramic analysis that we have from the various stratas, we think that it must have been created sometime in the 3rd century BC. But the rampart that was buried under it is about 2 centuries older. It must have been built at the very end of the 6th, beginning of the 5th century, which means it's a major defensive project established by the royal dynasty of Paphos.
And staying in Paphos, the city is preparing for its own inauguration as the 2017 European Capital of Culture.
Throughout the year we have many collaborations, many exhibitions, residencies of artists both in Paphos and Arcus, and this goes along throughout the year.
Donald Trump's inauguration today as the 45th President of the United States has led to a global movement calling for the recognition of fundamental human rights, equality and diversity. Across the world, thousands of people will be marching to demand respect for these aims. Here in Cyprus, a vigil will be held outside the American Embassy at 6 o'clock this evening. Anthula Papadopoulou from KISA, the NGO which supports the rights of migrants and campaigns against racism, is one of the organisers. Anthula, it's not going to be a women's movement-led march, as it is in, for example, most states in the United States. You've made this a wider call for recognition of human rights across the board, haven't you?
Well, we have, but let me tell you that also, despite the fact that the marchers in Washington, D.C., and everywhere else in the United States, as well as the rest of the world, women-led, nevertheless, these marches and these events are all inclusive. Everywhere it's emphasized that, okay, the women have taken the lead for once, but they are all very inclusive of everybody, and that's what we are doing as well. In other words, we as KISA, of course, are not a women's organization, as you said, but we believe that this march all over the world is symbolic of the resistance of people against what Trump and his election signifies for the world. In other words, we are for defending, for protecting fundamental human rights, for diversity, for equality, for social justice. And therefore, we call on everybody who respects these aims to join us this evening in doing our bit, very little bit, I'm afraid, against what Trump stands for.
Now, you have decided not to march. Instead, you're going to hold a candlelit vigil. So what form, actually, is the whole event going to take? How long is it going to last? It's jolly chilly here in Cyprus. You need to persuade people to put on their winter woolies and come and join you.
That's right. We have decided to hold a Lights for Rights event. I think there is one a similar event by the same name in Brussels and elsewhere, because, okay, we've decided to do this very late. We wouldn't have enough time to get a respectable march, and therefore we are going to start at 6 o'clock in the afternoon when it will be dark, and therefore lights will be seen. And it's perhaps going to last about an hour and a half or 2 hours, depending on, the people there.
Speeches? Have you got organisations supporting you?
There will be no speeches.
Well, that's a relief.
For many people, yes. We don't think that it's necessary to have any speeches. We have issued a draft press release. We'll let you have it later on when we have the okay from organizations and individuals that have agreed to be there with us.
And what sort of support have you received from other organisations and individuals?
We hope to have at least a few organizations with us. We have had a lot of individuals actually agreeing with us and participating in the event.
So you're really asking anybody who supports those things that you mentioned at the beginning to join you, even if it's not for the full hour and a half, but to bring a candle or some form of light and join you at 6 o'clock.
That's right, yes. So that we can put Cyprus on the map of this International Day of Action. Even, there is a march in Saudi Arabia. So obviously Cyprus could not but be there.
So if you want to join Anthula Papadopoulou and all the other people who are going to support that event, you need to be at the American Embassy in Nicosia from 6 o'clock this evening.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
We're going to talk now about archaeology, because the University of Cyprus has for several years, I think since 2006, been working on what's known as the Paphos Urban Landscape Project, or to make it easier, PULP. And joining us on the programme this week is Professor Maria Iakovou. First of all, Maria, before we talk about the exciting findings at Kouklia, tell us a bit about the PULP project, because Kouklia is probably one of the most important archaeological sites in Cyprus, isn't it?
That's for sure, because Kouklia is the modern village situated practically on top of the capital center of ancient Paphos. Kouklia, in fact, is entirely an archaeological zone. It has been a most important ancient city, I would say, ever since at least the 14th century before Christ. And that's why we have there the famous sanctuary known as the Sanctuary of Aphrodite. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding the way the sanctuary is approached, because that is practically all that one sees today in terms of antiquities when you visit Paphos, Kouklia Paphos. So we went out there because I specialize in the ancient city kingdoms of Cyprus, most of the time at least. And I realized that it was about time that we should have been trying to find the administrative center of this fascinating old city-state. I mean, it's just fields beyond the sanctuary, right? So we introduced a very specialized methodology, which is called landscape analysis. One uses geographical information systems, geophysical surveys. We combine the best of up-to-date resources so that we could approach and evaluate the landscape. We're talking about something like 2 to 3 square kilometers around the sanctuary. And it worked. I mean, I must admit that the results are far, far better than I would have ever expected. For the first years, we were able to target some of the major ancient sites and have short-term excavations every May, June to ascertain that these were indeed parts of the ancient city. But to be honest, the monumental results were not, that exciting. I mean, they were not the kind of results that you preserve for visitors to come and visit.
You didn't find mosaic floors or things like that, but have you gone down far enough yet?
Yes, thank God we didn't find mosaic floors, and I will explain why. When Cyprus was occupied first by the Ptolemies and then by the Romans, they put an end to the original, the autochthonous city-state system of the island. They united the island politically and economically. This meant the very end of the different local dynasties. We wanted to find the area which was governed by these ancient dynasties, because ancient Paphos is one of the most important of these old city-states of the island. But the visibility we have of Kouklia, it's a visibility dating to the Roman era. During the Hellenistic and Roman era, the sanctuary was transformed. It acquired a completely new identity. It became almost international. And that's why we have all these mosaic floors around the village. But at the same time, the urban landscape, and that's why we're talking about the Paphos urban landscape, contracted around the sanctuary because that was all that was important during the Hellenistic and the Roman period. And that's how the area where the ancient city had expanded gradually became fields. Archaeologically, however, it means that those areas did not receive later interferences in terms of buildings. That's why I could target that area and find windows down into the 2nd millennium BC.
So tell us what you did find last year, because there were some quite exciting things that point the direction for this year.
Extremely exciting, and it's not just last year's results. It's been going on since 2009, but we're careful about what we announce, because to begin with, we were expanding horizontally and not going into depth. The moment we managed to go down, we realized we were, in fact, in what we should call the economic center of the ancient capital, on top of a citadel, a beautiful plateau, quite high, higher than where the sanctuary is situated, and a kilometer to the east. And that must have been the heart of the administrative center in the classical and the Hellenistic period. It contains storage rooms and industrial units, one next to the other. And it survives, the walls survive up to a height of 1.5 meters minimum. Each one of these rooms, units as we call them, now needs to be excavated in terms of rescuing archaeo-environmental information, biodata as we call them. So we initiated a completely new methodological approach. We have invited a very special team from the Wiener laboratory of the American School of Classical Studies in Athens, and we started collecting samples per unit so that we could find out what was being produced, what was being stored. So once, a few years ago, I had one project. Now this one project has at least 6 projects under it. And all of it has to move in parallel, so we will not be missing any of this precious data because in Cyprus we still don't have an administrative center of the first millennium BC that has been excavated according to these new archaeo-environmental rules. It's an opportunity that we must not lose.
What else are you expecting to find there? There were talks in the press about tombs, but I don't think you found a tomb. But you know where one might be.
Yes, let me explain this. As we were going through our landscape analysis, I realized that there was this strange mound that didn't look natural to me. But of course I used to think, well, there have been archaeologists around for 100 years at least. Couldn't they have said something about this mound? Well, it looks as if we are the first to identify it as a man-made tumulus. This is very strange and very rare for the archaeological culture of Cyprus. Cyprus is not known to have produced these huge mounds. These huge mounds are known in Macedonia, for instance. They are also known in Mesopotamia in other periods. So we got our geologists, and they said, of course, this is a man-made mound. And I said, but that makes it unique, because it's huge. It's about 100 meters by 60, 10 meters to the top. We estimated that they must have carted about 10,000 cubic meters of soil. This alludes to a huge human force that works under someone who can make them do all this hard work. And on top of everything, the kind of soil that was collected was not collected from the surface of the area. It's marl. Marl is a paleo soil. It's a soil that you have to dig very deep down to get to it. So you can imagine that coring these cubic meters of marl must have meant, to begin with, years of work and a huge human force.
What do you think lies under it, and how long might it take you to dig down, slowly, not to destroy anything,
as
to discover?
Archaeologists, we should not think in advance. We have to create methodological solutions. So in Cyprus, we're not used to excavating mounds. So I had to gradually develop a project that would not destroy it and that would get to whatever may be hiding underneath. So we managed so far something quite incredible. The southeastern quarter of the mound has been thoroughly explored, and it revealed underneath it a huge rampart which is much earlier in date than the mound. We think that the mound, based on the ceramic analysis that we have from the various stratas, we think that it must have been created sometime in the 3rd century BC. But the rampart that was buried under it is about 2 centuries older. It must have been built at the very end of the 6th, beginning of the 5th century, which means it's a major defensive project established by the royal dynasty of Paphos, by the city kingdom of Paphos, right? It's pretty impressive because the only reason it survived was because it was placed under the mound. It's at the northern end, it stands up to 5 meters. This is unique in Cyprus. And it has 2 staircases opposite each other, leading up to towers, of course. That makes it a very, very special monument because we're not used to finding such monumental edifices. They're usually destroyed down to their foundations. I would say to our friends, don't go trying to see it because it's been completely covered. We had to cover it, we have to box it in, as we say, with the Department of Antiquities technicians, because it's made of very special materials. There's a lot of mud brick, and if we would have left that mud brick exposed, especially after the current rains, we would have ended up with just mud. So I made it a point, the moment we finished this year's campaign, that it would all be boxed in, temporarily. If once the entire excavation project is over, the department, the community, the people of Cyprus in general decide that this has to become a monument where visitors can go and see it, if it can become part of a big archaeological park, because it's directly associated with the other side where we have the economic center, then the boxing in will be removed and we would have to preserve this huge monument so that people can visit it. But now it's not visible.
Now we're just at the Kouklia area that people know and love, and there is obviously an awful lot more that can be discovered in that area.
That is for sure, but unfortunately, over the years, what we see happening is that some not very ethical people have been opening tombs every evening. And some of these tombs are very close to our excavations, and we continue finding in the morning that people have been busy during the night. You see, it's fields away from the village, and it doesn't look as if anybody is able to stop these gangs. We see tombs being looted. We're just hardly 50 meters away from where we're digging. So we don't have tombs, that's for sure, because that's not something we wanted to find. Lots of tombs are around. We wanted to establish the political economy of the ancient city-state. And it looks as if we've been very lucky.
It looks as if it's another jewel in Cyprus' archaeological crown. We've been talking to Professor Maria Iakovou of the University of Cyprus about the Pulp Project, and if you Google Pulp Project University of Cyprus, you can get all the details online.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
Down in the west of Cyprus, everything's gearing up for Paphos to be the European capital of culture, along with another city in Denmark, for 2017. Joining us on the programme today is Anastasia Anastasiou, who is the Marketing and Communications Officer for Paphos 2017. Anastasia, an exciting time for Paphos. I know things have been gearing up over the last several months, but it all kicks off, officially at least, on Saturday the 28th, next Saturday. So, what is going to be happening?
Indeed, everything is gearing up for the 28th of January, which is the date that the journey of the European Capital of Culture begins officially. Following several months and years, actually, of hard work, we are finally getting closer to the opening ceremony of the European Capital of Culture. I would say that for both the 28th and 29th of January, we have several events, plenty of events happening in the city that include a walk around the city, exhibitions, music in coffee shops, also with the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra on Sunday, and with the Cyprus Theatre Organization. We have a close collaboration, and several performances will be given for that. But for the 28th of January at 7 o'clock at the Town Hall Square, we have the opening ceremony. Let me say that the opening ceremony of the European Capital of Culture is inspired by the myth of Pygmalion and Galatia, and of course the many mythological and historical events that followed the city's history. I would say that it's a celebratory performance that seeks to portray the core concepts of the open air factory, and it's going to be a spectacular event that nobody should miss.
Where can people attend these events? How do they find out? Is it all free, or do they have to buy tickets? What's the thinking behind it?
So, based on the concept of the open air factory, all events for the weekend are free No reservations, no tickets for those events, and especially for the opening ceremony. And this is something to urge people actually to walk in the city, to meet the new face of the city, and of course have a look on what's going around in terms of the infrastructure works, and also give a vibe to the city with all those events. So all the events are free of entrance, and all the information can be found, of course, on the Paphos 2017 website, www.paphos2017.eu. You can find all the program of events for the weekend, starting from 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock in the night.
Now then, tell me a little bit about the cooperation you've got with your twin European capital, Aarhus in Denmark, because they're also sending people over, I think, for your opening ceremony, and I think that Paphos took some sort of part in theirs.
Indeed, we have a close collaboration with our sister European capital of culture, the city of Aarhus, whose opening ceremony is on the 21st of January, and we have the Music Lyceum of Paphos choir participating at the opening ceremony events. And same is for the opening ceremony of Paphos 2017, as we have on Saturday morning at 12 o'clock on Kennedy Square. We have the Aarhus Jazz Orchestra, which will be conducted by Lars Moller. These are the first events that will take place for both cities. But throughout the year we have many collaborations, many exhibitions, residencies of artists, both in Paphos and Aarhus, and this goes along throughout the year.
And how has Paphos prepared for this in terms of organising a whole year's worth of cultural events?
We are planning and we are organising all these events from day one that Paphos won the title of the European Capital of Culture. Of course, a number of volunteers was involved right from the beginning. Paphos was the candidate city. And as we go along and up to today, the Paphos 2017 organization has a team that organizes and is responsible for all the events. Of course, we do have external partners, not only volunteers, but we do have, for example, for the opening ceremony, we do have the Walk the Plank company from the UK, who is responsible for the artistic direction and the production of the opening ceremony. So this is all these events happening in 2017. I must say that it's a work that has been going back for a few years now, since 2013.
But it's also something that's had an impact, I think, on the infrastructure in Paphos, because there's been a lot of talk over the years about how long roadworks have taken and so on, but I think your new mayor has tried to get most of those done and dusted and finished with in time for this very important year for the city.
Indeed, most of the infrastructure works actually happening now in Paphos are because of the European Capital of Culture. This is something that Paphos 2017 also included in the bid book during the candidacy, and this is something very normal, as for all the European Capitals of Culture, all the infrastructure works take place before the year, and I must say that throughout the year we will be facing a city that will be changing. There are, of course, many works that still are under construction, but deadlines are set, and we work closely with the municipality of Paphos for those works, as they will be used for a number of events of the European Capital of Culture.
So all the details then are on www.paphos, spelt with an F, 2017.eu, but it's all going to kick off on the 28th of January. Where again and at what time?
The opening ceremony will take place at the Town Hall Square, which is in the heart of the city centre, at 7 o'clock. All events, as we said, with free entrance, and people are free to walk around the city from early in the morning until the very late.
And all those details on the website. Anastasia Anastasiou, thanks for joining us. Very good luck for Paphos' year as the European Capital of Culture. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.